This is Dr. Eris Thorne, broadcasting from the RV Triton, currently positioned over the Challenger Deep in the Western Pacific. My primary role here, before this absolute impossibility began, was to monitor the seismic integrity of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point on Earth's crust, a region thought to be geologically stable and utterly desolate. That stability, that desolation, and indeed the entire premise of our understanding of this planet ended exactly 47 minutes ago. The first sign was not visual, it was sonic. Our deep-water hydrophones, sensitive enough to track the mating calls of whales thousands of miles away, registered a sustained low-frequency pressure wave. It was an anomaly we initially categorized as a megathrust earthquake, a massive, sudden slip along a subduction zone. The energy release was catastrophic, charting far off the Richter scale, generating pressure oscillations that nearly blew out the Triton's hull transducers. We logged a colossal, localized seismic event, a wave propagating through the water column and the seafloor at nearly 15,000 meters per second. But the wave was wrong. Earthquakes generate chaotic, high-entropy seismic noise. This sound was structured. It was a sustained, rhythmic subsonic pulse, a mechanical thrumming so deep it felt less like a sound and more like an internal vibration of the world itself. It was not the sound of rock tearing, it was the sound of something massive moving. Our immediate action was to drop an emergency geoacoustic monitoring buoy down to the seafloor, capable of surviving the near-crushing 15,000 psi pressure. The data returned was impossible. The buoy's seismic profile did not register the friction and slip characteristic of a tectonic plate. It registered rhythmic, localized displacement, a massive volume of rock and water being smoothly, perfectly displaced along the trench wall. The only logical conclusion was that a body of unprecedented, colossal scale was forcing its way out of the planet's mantle, and doing so with conscious, deliberate motion. The abyssal floor was being unsealed. As the displacement continued, the tectonic betrayal began. The sustained upward force triggered localized, sharp, shallow micro-earthquakes along the trench, but these were secondary effects, tremors caused by the main body's movement, not the cause of the movement itself. The geological survey data showed the lithospheric plate, the rigid outer layer of the Earth, being bent and deformed by a localized pressure source. The creature was displacing rock layers miles thick. This scale is beyond comprehension. It suggests a being capable of exerting force rivaling the energy of mantle convection. Then came the visual confirmation. We launched a specialized, heavy-duty robotic deep glider equipped with enhanced optical arrays and high-lumen lighting. The glider reached an initial depth of 5 kilometers before its optical sensors went into immediate critical overload. The creature was emitting a massive, sustained bioluminescence, not the faint, chemically triggered glow of deep-sea fauna, but a continuous internal electromagnetic radiance that turned the colossal surrounding area into a churning, sickly greenish-white plasma of light and vapor. The light alone was enough to register a massive thermal anomaly, heat venting from the creature's upper surface, heating the water in its vicinity to nearly 50 degrees Celsius against the near-freezing ambient temperature. The glider managed to capture a few seconds of stabilized footage before the heat and pressure waves destroyed its sensors and telemetry. The footage showed a structure that defied description, not skin or rock, but a massive chitinous biological armor covered in geometric ridges and fissures that pulsed with the internal light. The creature's upper surface was so vast, so massive, that the glider's software could not register it as a single object. It was categorized as mobile geological anomaly, a living, moving landmass. The creature was so large that our scientific instruments could not comprehend it as a life form. They could only identify it as a failure of terrestrial physics. The emergence is having a catastrophic effect on the entire water column. The rapid displacement of rock and water is generating a series of massive, complex internal tsunamis. Waves that travel through the deep ocean layers, unseen on the surface, but carrying colossal energy. These waves are shattering the thermal layers, causing massive, immediate upwellings of cold, mineral-rich deep-sea water, which is suddenly mixing with the heated surface water. This chaotic mixing is creating violent, localized marine storms that are sinking surface vessels across a wide area. More immediately terrifying is the toxic plume. The creature's ascent is releasing unimaginable quantities of deep-sea, mineral-rich hydrothermal fluid and pressurized methane hydrates, compounds that have been sealed in the abyssal floor for millennia. These plumes are now mixing with the upper ocean layers, creating an environment of acute biological toxicity. Fish, whales, and all surface marine life are being immediately poisoned or violently asphyxiated by the sudden, concentrated chemical shift. This is not a localized kill zone. This is the immediate, systematic poisoning of the entire Pacific ecosystem, initiated by the creature's violent birth. The environmental damage caused by the creature's emergence alone is already catastrophic, threatening global marine extinction in a matter of weeks. The creature is not merely a threat, it is a planetary-scale ecological disaster unfolding in real time. The communication silence from global command centers is absolute. We managed to relay the initial seismic and acoustic data bursts to the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center and U.S. Navy Command before our satellite link was severed by what we assume was the creature's localized electromagnetic interference, a side effect of its immense internal energy generation. The military and political commands are in a state of existential humiliation. They have protocols for submarines, for nuclear exchange, for seismic events, but no protocol for a living tectonic scale entity that spontaneously emerges from the deepest part of the planet. The creature's initial act was to destroy the premise of human geological security. We relied on the Earth's crust as a constant, rigid foundation. The creature has proven the crust to be a mere membrane, easily pierced and displaced. The greatest fear is not its intent, but its origin. If it existed in the mantle beneath the crust, it implies a biosphere and a structural reality far older, deeper, and more formidable than anything we have ever conceived. We are not facing an alien from space. We are facing an alien from within, a life form that has been patiently waiting in the planet's geological core while humanity bickered on the surface. We have discovered a hidden civilization, but it is a single living city built of flesh and rock. Our specialized magneto-acoustic sensors, designed to track the deep-sea magnetic field, are now registering a massive, sustained magnetic field distortion around the creature's epicenter. The creature is not merely bioluminescent. It is generating an immense, localized electromagnetic pulse, powerful enough to disrupt the Earth's magnetic field over hundreds of kilometers. The power required to sustain this simultaneous gravitational displacement, thermal venting, and electromagnetic generation is astronomical. A complete, efficient conversion of energy that defies all known terrestrial biochemistry. The creature is a living, single-organism power plant. We have managed to stabilize our own communication link thanks to emergency analog relays, and are still recording the seismic data. The creature's movement has slowed, but it is now consistently maintaining a position at approximately 1,000 meters beneath the surface. It is no longer moving upward. It is waiting. The only sound now being registered by the hydrophones is the soft, rhythmic, subsonic thrumming. A sound that seems to be a continuous internal function, perhaps respiration, digestion, or thought. The most profound, terrifying question remains: why now? Why did it emerge after millennia of silence? Was it triggered by the decades of human deep-sea mining, seismic testing, or pollution that finally disturbed its ancient slumber? Was its emergence a response to humanity, or merely an unintended coincidence, a life cycle event of an ancient, indifferent entity? The only thing we know for certain is that the abyss has been unsealed, and the colossal life form of the deep is now staring upward at the surface world. And the surface world has no defense against a life form that can bend the crust of the earth. This is Dr. Eris Thorne, broadcasting from the RV Triton. It is now 11:30 p.m. local time, 7 hours since the abyssal emergence. The colossal life form, which we are tentatively referring to by the designation Leviathan, remains anchored at a depth of approximately 1 kilometer, directly above the Challenger Deep. The scientific truth is this: the creature is not resting, it is stabilizing its environment. The immediate consequence of its presence is the tsunami of awe. The chaotic internal waves I reported earlier, the internal tsunamis, have now propagated outwards and are reaching shallow coastal shelves. These waves, carrying massive energy from the displacement, are creating surges that are defying all conventional tsunami prediction models. Tsunami modeling relies on predictable seismic inputs and seafloor geometry. This event, caused by a biological, non-seismic displacement of rock and water, renders all predictive software useless. The result is a series of massive, unpredictable coastal surges striking the eastern Pacific Rim, primarily across Southeast Asia and the western U.S. coast. The waves are characterized not by height, but by unforeseen velocity and energy. They are not walls of water. They are rapid, explosive incursions of ocean that are overwhelming coastal defenses designed for seismic events. Simultaneously, the Leviathan's localized thermal venting, the immense heat radiating from its upper carapace, has triggered a massive, localized atmospheric shift. We are seeing the creation of an immense stationary supercyclone directly above the emergence zone. The heat and moisture transfer from the creature is acting as a constant, unprecedented energy source, creating a storm system that dwarfs any Category 5 hurricane. This storm is not moving, it is growing vertically and intensifying its rotational speed, anchoring itself to the creature's stationary heat source. This tsunami of awe is both oceanic and atmospheric, a catastrophic environmental double strike that is eliminating all hope of immediate intervention or escape. Our specialized chemical sensor packages, dropped to measure the fallout from the creature's ascent, are returning data that indicates an ecosystem collapse far faster and more complete than we initially predicted. The creature is not merely disrupting the water, it is initiating a planetary-scale chemical purge. The toxic plume from the deep, composed of pressurized methane hydrates, high concentrations of heavy metals, nickel, iridium, mercury, and vast quantities of hydrogen sulfide, has risen from the deep trenches and is now mixing with the surface water photic zone. This sudden, acute chemical contamination is causing an immediate, total kill of phytoplankton and zooplankton across hundreds of thousands of square kilometers. The plankton, the microscopic base of the entire marine food web, cannot cope with the sudden, massive influx of anaerobic and toxic compounds. This is the plankton purge. This is not a local die-off. This is the immediate, systematic elimination of the primary oxygen producers and caloric base for the global ocean. The chemical signature is so potent, so concentrated, that we estimate the entire Pacific marine ecosystem will enter a state of irreversible biological inertia within 72 hours. The chemical reaction is being magnified by the creature's bioluminescence. The immense internal electromagnetic light radiating from the Leviathan is triggering photochemical reactions within the toxic plume, creating complex, highly unstable organic metallic compounds that were previously unknown to terrestrial chemistry. These compounds are highly corrosive and are proving lethal even to deep-sea extremophiles. The Leviathan is not just killing the ocean with its presence, it is actively chemically altering the planet's biosphere into something unrecognizable, a new environment defined by its own lethal, unknowable biology. The military response, which was inevitable, has been catastrophic. Reports, garbled and heavily redacted, confirm that a multinational force, primarily consisting of nuclear submarines and deep-sea surveillance assets, attempted to approach the emergence zone. Their goal was likely to use acoustic warfare or kinetic strikes to either neutralize or drive the creature back into the deep. The results were devastating. The creature's massive, sustained magnetic field distortion and its subsonic pressure pulse instantly rendered the submarine's sophisticated acoustic and navigation systems useless. The immense energy signature of the Leviathan provided an active countermeasure against all forms of human-developed deep-sea warfare. The submarines were not destroyed by an external weapon. They were paralyzed by the sheer physics of the creature's existence. They became deaf, blind, and immobile, trapped in the crushing depths by the creature's silent, massive defense field. The loss of these assets is total. confirming that humanity has zero military capability against a life form operating on this scale and complexity. The creature has achieved a deep-sea betrayal. We relied on the ocean's vastness as a strategic domain for military power and resource security. The Leviathan has claimed the deep ocean as its own and proven that human technology is completely obsolete within its domain. The world's great naval powers are now facing the reality that the deep sea is off limits, controlled by an entity that can passively neutralize a nuclear submarine fleet. This strategic failure guarantees a rapid escalation of global political tension as nations scramble to redefine their security in a world where the oceans are now hostile territory. Our specialized acoustic array is continuing to gather data on the Leviathan's continuous, low-frequency subsonic thrumming. This is the key to understanding the creature's nature. This thrumming is not random noise. It is a complex, ordered sequence of frequencies that suggests internal biological function on a scale we cannot fathom. The estimated mass and volume of the creature, based on the displacement field, puts it in the range of multiple cubic kilometers, a mass previously thought to be possible only for static geological formations. The creature is effectively the size of a mountain range. The energy required to sustain a metabolism for a body of this volume requires a complete re-evaluation of terrestrial biochemistry. It is a living geological object, defying the square-cube law and all principles of biomechanical sustainability. The bioacoustic riddle lies in the internal pressure waves. The thrumming sequence reveals a highly complex, layered pattern. Fundamental resonance, a constant, extremely low-frequency pulse, possibly indicating cellular respiration or core energy generation, the sound of its heartbeat, localized cavitations, rapid, rhythmic bursts of higher frequency, suggesting massive internal fluid transport, the sound of blood flow or nutrient cycling on a grand geological scale, non-periodic signature, intermittent, highly structured, complex bursts that defy simple acoustic categorization. Our analysts are tentatively identifying these as intentional, communicative, or cognitive signals, the sound of the creature thinking. If this creature is thinking, its cognitive process must be as vast and slow as its geological size. Its thoughts could span days, weeks, or years. The pressure pulse we registered 7 hours ago may not have been an emergence. It may have been a single, massive act of will, the creature deciding it was time to move. We are listening to the sound of an ancient, slow, colossal intelligence that is now interacting with the surface world for the first time. The terror is that our entire history may be less than a single one of its fleeting thoughts. The Leviathan is the ultimate expression of biological scale, forcing humanity to confront the limits of its own biological imagination. This is Dr. Aris Thorne, aboard the RV Triton. It is now 3 a.m. local time, 11 hours since the Leviathan emerged from the Challenger Deep. The most catastrophic fear of the geological community is now being realized: crustal displacement. The creature is not merely anchored, it is growing. Our seismic monitoring systems, using data from a global network of deep-sea sensors, confirm that the Leviathan has increased its calculated volume by a measurable 8% in the last 3 hours. This growth is occurring not through feeding, but through the continuous, sustained upward pressure it exerts on the Pacific lithospheric plate. The creature is behaving like a colossal living diapir, a mass of mobile material forcing its way through overlying rock, except this material is flesh and chitin, not salt or magma. The pressure is triggering a geological failure we never believed possible. We are recording massive, rapid fault slippage along the edges of the creature's emergence zone. These are not minor tremors. They are sustained, deep-focus earthquakes occurring at depths of up to 40 kilometers, directly caused by the Leviathan's body bending the Earth's crust. This is the cracking Earth. This process is destabilizing the Pacific Ring of Fire, the most seismically active zone on the planet. The initial energy release from the creature's ascent has initiated a massive, cascading tectonic chain reaction, triggering large, destructive earthquakes across the entire Pacific Rim, far outside the localized emergence zone. We are witnessing the biological destabilization of a continental plate caused by a life form whose sheer mass is defying geological equilibrium. The plankton purge is accelerating, and its catastrophic consequences are now shifting from the ocean to the atmosphere. The massive influx of hydrogen sulfide and heavy metals from the deep ocean, the toxic plume generated by the creature's ascent, has sterilized the surface water across the emergence zone. The phytoplankton, responsible for generating up to 70% of the Earth's free oxygen through photosynthesis, are dead or dying. This creates a devastating chemical feedback loop. Oxygen loss. The immediate cessation of phytoplankton photosynthesis leads to a rapid reduction in the global oxygen production rate. Anaerobic domination. The toxic, deoxygenated water is creating massive dead zones where only anaerobic bacteria can thrive. These bacteria produce vast quantities of methane and more hydrogen sulfide, further poisoning the water and accelerating global warming. Atmospheric methane venting. The massive amounts of methane hydrates released by the Leviathan's upward movement are now bubbling to the surface. As the creature continues to vent heat, this methane is being aggressively released into the atmosphere, creating a rapid, unprecedented greenhouse gas spike that will trigger catastrophic, immediate climate change, the methane catastrophe. The Leviathan is not just killing the ocean, it is actively chemically suffocating the planet and simultaneously triggering a rapid thermal runaway event. The consequence is not a long-term environmental disaster, it is an immediate, species-wide atmospheric threat. Humanity has maybe weeks, perhaps less, before the sustained loss of oxygen production and the methane spike render the atmosphere hostile to complex terrestrial life. The creature's emergence is, in effect, a planetary-scale chemical weapon deployed passively. The political and cultural reaction across the globe is one of global shock. The initial disbelief has hardened into a terrified paralysis, primarily due to the creature's unclassifiable nature. Is it an animal? A god? A natural disaster? Every human institution, scientific, religious, military, relies on categorization to define a response. The Leviathan defies all human categories. It is too large to be an animal, too structured to be a geological event, and too physical to be a god. This failure of categorization has led to a failure of human language. Leaders cannot issue commands because the words to describe the threat do not exist in any terrestrial protocol. The only communication radiating from the world's command centers is a frantic, disorganized demand for data, analysis, and a recognizable threat profile, none of which we can provide. This paralysis is being magnified by the creature's ongoing bioacoustic riddle. We have managed to isolate a new layer in the Leviathan's subsonic thrumming, a highly complex, non-repeating sequence of pulses that appears to be focused in a rhythmic, directed pattern toward the Asian continental shelf. This pattern is not random. It is intentional signal transmission. The creature is not merely breathing, it is communicating. But the language is a complex, multi-layered bioacoustic sequence that suggests a logic structure vastly different from our own. We are listening to the sound of an intelligence that operates on the scale of a planetary feature, and we have no ability to even confirm whether the signal is a greeting, a warning, or a declaration of war. The military's dilemma is now terminal. Engage and risk immediate catastrophic failure, or stand down and accept planetary chemical suffocation. The decision has been made for high-risk engagement. Fragmented radio signals confirm that the remaining Allied naval forces are converging on the emergence zone, preparing a massive, coordinated, deep-strike kinetic attack. This involves using specialized, hardened kinetic penetrators designed to survive the deep-sea pressure and impact the Leviathan's chitinous upper armor. The primary tactical goal is not destruction, but deterrence, to inflict enough damage to disrupt the creature's core stability and force it to retreat back into the mantle. This attack is an act of ultimate folly. The creature has already proven its passive defense systems, its colossal magnetic distortion field, and its immense, incapacitating subsonic pulse can neutralize a modern submarine fleet. Attempting a kinetic strike is a desperate gamble. Moreover, the environmental cost of failure is catastrophic. If the attack manages to breach the creature's bioluminescent carapace, it could release an even greater, more acute surge of the core's toxic compounds, instantly escalating the chemical purge and guaranteeing global atmospheric collapse. Humanity is forced to gamble its survival on a massive, unified, high-risk attack against an enemy whose power is derived from the very physics of the planet. An attack that might just complete the ecological disaster the creature began. The military is forced to choose between passive suffocation and active chemical suicide. This is Dr. Aris Thorne, broadcasting from the RV Triton. It is 6 a.m. local time, 14 hours since the Leviathan emerged. The sun has risen, illuminating the vast, unprecedented disaster zone. The military, despite our warnings, has launched the Kinetic Gambit. 2 hours ago, the Combined Naval Strike Group executed the Deep Strike Kinetic Attack. The strategy involved launching hardened, depleted uranium penetrators, weapons designed to survive crushing deep-sea pressure, aimed at the most seismically stressed fissures on the creature's chitinous upper carapace. The hope was simple: to puncture the creature's core stability and force a retreat. The result was predictable and catastrophic. The Leviathan did not react kinetically. It reacted electromagnetically. The creature's massive, sustained magnetic distortion field and its subsonic pressure pulse, the bioacoustic riddle, acted as a perfect non-violent defense. The projectiles, relying on precision guidance systems, were thrown violently off course by the overwhelming magnetic interference, spiraling harmlessly into the abyssal plane. Worse, the sustained, powerful subsonic pulse from the creature created massive, localized acoustic cavitation in the water, generating sonic shock waves that did more damage to the launching vessels than the projectiles did to the target. The attack was an ultimate folly, proving definitively that human kinetic force is completely irrelevant to an entity that controls its own surrounding physics. The creature's only response to the attack was a change in its acoustic pattern. The rhythmic thrumming intensified, becoming a unified, deep-frequency roar that resonated through the ship's hull. This roar was not a sound of rage, but a colossal, sustained bioacoustic pulse that has further saturated the Pacific Basin with toxic plumes. It was the creature's passive demonstration of power. Your aggression only accelerates your own poisoning. The Leviathan's continued presence is creating a geological reckoning. The creature is now estimated to be maintaining a displacement pressure of approximately 5 × 10⁹ pascals, equivalent to the lithostatic pressure at a depth of 50 kilometers. This pressure, combined with its continued growth, has created a permanent, visible crustal scar, a deep, massive depression in the Pacific Plate where the creature is anchored. Our seismic mapping reveals the crust beneath the Leviathan is thinned, fractured, and permanently altered. The creature is behaving less like an animal and more like a living tectonic phenomenon. This is driving massive, unpredicted volcanic activity along the nearest subduction zones. The release of pressure and heat caused by the creature's displacement is acting as a trigger for magma chambers that were otherwise stable. We are seeing sustained, explosive underwater eruptions miles from the emergence zone, generating massive amounts of ash and sulfur dioxide, SO2, that are rapidly fouling the atmosphere. The creature's emergence has not just initiated earthquakes. It has triggered a planetary-scale geological fever, forcing the Earth to violently vent its internal pressure. This geological activity is compounding the methane catastrophe. The massive venting of volcanic SO2 is rapidly creating acid rain across the Pacific. Simultaneously, the heat from the underwater eruptions is accelerating the release of methane hydrates from the adjacent deep-sea floor. The Earth is being simultaneously poisoned by deep-sea toxins, choked by volcanic ash, and warmed by greenhouse gases, all initiated by the Leviathan's singular, non-violent act of existence. Our only sustained effort is the attempt to understand the bioacoustic riddle, the creature's complex subsonic thrumming. The acoustic pattern is now exhibiting layers of complexity that defy simple biotelemetry. It is a communication system rooted in the manipulation of pressure and resonance within the water column. We have identified sequences that mimic known geological frequencies. the resonant frequencies of certain rock formations, specific fault lines, and the rhythmic cycle of tidal forces. This suggests the Leviathan's consciousness operates on a geological scale, perceiving the Earth's tectonic and oceanic cycles as its primary environment. The creature is literally thinking in earthquakes and tides. The most profound recent discovery is the identification of repeating, non-random, complex pulse chains that appear to be directed toward the Mariana Islands and the Asian landmass. We theorize this is intentional signaling. It is not English or math or light. It is a language of scale, using pressure waves to communicate with the only things large enough to listen: continental shelves and deep-sea trenches. The creature may not be communicating with us, but communicating about us, treating humanity as merely a biological anomaly on the surface of the geological entities it views as peers. This profound lack of acknowledgement is perhaps more terrifying than any declaration of hostility. It views us as irrelevant noise in its massive geological conversation. The world's geopolitical response is now characterized by existential blackout. The loss of the submarine fleet, the failure of the kinetic strike, and the compounding environmental catastrophe have led to total paralysis in global command centers. Military paralysis. Nations are withdrawing all naval assets from the Pacific, recognizing the futility of engagement. The sudden absolute loss of deep-sea strategic capability has created a profound power vacuum, accelerating internal political instability across maritime nations. Environmental collapse. The plankton purge and methane catastrophe are forcing governments to deal with the immediate threat of widespread coastal poisoning and rapid climate shift. The immediate survival strategy has become resource hoarding and internal defense, replacing international cooperation with aggressive, localized selfishness. Psychological trauma. The creature's scale and its passive defense, the fact that it defeats us not with weapons but with its simple existence, has shattered the collective human ego. We are confronting a force that is too large to fight, too deep to understand, and too silent to negotiate with. The psychological burden of this impossible threat is leading to widespread social collapse, as the last vestiges of centralized authority crumble under the weight of cosmic futility. The creature has achieved conquest by sublime scale. Our mission on the Triton has devolved from scientific study to archival witness. We have stabilized our hull and power systems, using our last energy reserves to maintain the acoustic array and the comms link. Our final duty is to document the final moments of the terrestrial age before the atmosphere becomes toxic or the crust finally fractures. We are recording the Leviathan's size, the seismic response of the plate, the chemical profile of the toxic plume, and the structure of the bioacoustic riddle. This data, stored on hardened drives, is our last offering to the future, whether that future is human or whatever intelligence may emerge from the impending collapse. It is the final, objective scientific record of the moment when a life form from within the Earth forced humanity to confront its own geological fragility. I look out at the Pacific. It is a vast, churning, glowing hellscape, boiling with the creature's bioluminescence and the steam from the volcanic vents. The only constant is the relentless, deep thrumming, the sound of an ancient, massive intelligence thinking on a geological timescale. We were not ready for the deep sea. We were not ready for life on this scale. Our end is not coming from the stars or the atom, but from the unsealed abyssal floor beneath our feet. I will maintain this broadcast until the hull fails or the air becomes lethal. This is Dr. Aris Thorne, broadcasting from the RV Triton. It is 10 a.m. local time, 18 hours since the Leviathan emerged. The creature remains anchored at 1 kilometer, and the supercyclone above us has intensified to an unbelievable, near-stationary Category 6 status, making visual observation impossible. Yet, the deep ocean beneath us is no longer dark. It is bathed in a perpetual, unearthly glow. The creature's bioluminescence is not merely a side effect. It is a profound, directed energy emission. We have managed to stabilize our high-density optical sensors and analyze the emitted light. The light spectrum is complex, spanning the entire visible range and extending deep into the ultraviolet and infrared. The sheer, sustained energy output of this light source is massive, calculated to be equivalent to the average output of a small city's nuclear power plant. The Leviathan is not just an animal. It is a living, single-organism fusion reactor, efficiently converting mass or core energy into light, heat, and electromagnetic distortion. This light is not passive. It appears to be a form of active sensory emission, a way for the creature to illuminate and survey its immediate environment. The light pulses and shifts subtly, tracing the movements of water, the flow of the toxic plumes, and the displacement of deep-sea fauna. The Leviathan is effectively using its own body as a colossal active sonar and visual mapping system. We are not observing the creature. We are being observed by its light. The creature's light has turned the darkest point on Earth into a cosmic laboratory, and we are the specimens illuminated for scrutiny. This bioluminescence is the Leviathan's eye, and it is perfectly, silently watching the collapse it has triggered. The Leviathan's bioluminescence and thermal venting have triggered a massive, irreversible deep-sea speciation event. The creatures of the abyssal plain, the extremophiles, the massive anglerfish, the long-finned cetaceans, which evolved over millennia for life in crushing darkness and cold, are being instantly subjected to lethal heat shock and overwhelming, persistent light. We have observed the apex predators of the deep, creatures adapted for the deepest pressures and perpetual night, suffering catastrophic biological failure. Their massive, specialized eyes are instantly burned out by the light's intensity. Their temperature regulation systems, designed for near-freezing water, are failing in the Leviathan's warm plume. The entire structure of the deep-sea food web has been inverted. The dominant, ancient life forms are dying off rapidly, replaced by a sudden bloom of thermotolerant, photoresistant microbial life that thrives in the creature's heated, chemically rich effluent. The Leviathan is not just killing the ocean, it is actively reseeding the deep biosphere with a new, alien ecology adapted to its presence. This phenomenon confirms the creature's vast temporal scale. It is not adapted to our environment, it is creating an environment adapted to itself. The entire ocean structure, from the photic zone to the abyssal plain, is being rapidly reorganized to accommodate the Leviathan's massive size and energy demands. This is not evolution, it is biological decree on a planetary scale. The great, ancient darkness of the abyss is being violently replaced by the creature's unearthly, fatal light. Our seismic and geoacoustic analysis has led to a single, terrifying conclusion about the Leviathan's origin: the core's betrayal. The creature did not emerge from a cave or a fissure. Its body structure and its energy signature suggest that it evolved not on the surface or in the water column, but within the Earth's mantle, the deep, hot, semi-solid layer beneath the crust. The creature's chitinous armor is laced with silicate and metallic compounds that are only stable under the immense heat and pressure of the deep mantle. Its biology is derived from geological chemistry, not surface biochemistry. The creature is not merely a deep-sea life form. It is a mantle organism. This redefines the threat. The creature's ascent was not a swim. It was a geological traversal. It spent millennia evolving in a world of magma and colossal pressure, using the crust as its ceiling. The emergence was not an escape. It was an intentional surfacing. This implies a completely unknown, massive, subcrustal biosphere that humanity never suspected. A world of geothermal life that views the thin, cool crust of the Earth as merely a membrane separating them from the chemical toxicity of the surface world. The Leviathan is the first scout of a hidden, massive, and ancient civilization that is biologically part of the planet itself. This is the core's betrayal. The Earth's stable interior, the bedrock of our security, is actually a massive, hostile ecosystem. The Leviathan is operating on a planetary maintenance protocol, viewing the surface life as an uncontrolled parasitic infection that is fouling the mantle's essential geothermal environment. Its emergence, its toxic plume, and its atmospheric manipulation are simply methods of planetary self-cleaning. The systemic removal of the volatile, destructive surface biomass, us, to ensure the stability of its own superior internal ecology. The creature is killing us because it is the planet defending itself. The political world has descended into terminal implosion. Nations are no longer communicating. They are sealing their borders against the impending atmospheric and oceanic collapse. The last desperate attempt at international cooperation, the Emergency Atmospheric Stabilization Plan, a futile effort to combat the methane catastrophe, has failed due to internal conflict over resource allocation. No nation is willing to sacrifice its own finite resources for a global, probably hopeless cause. The Leviathan has exposed the inherent fragmentation and self-interest of the human species. The political failure is now shifting to an internal military breakdown. Governments, unable to protect their populations from the tectonic betrayal and the plankton purge, are losing all authority. Civilian populations, faced with the existential, undeniable collapse of their geopolitical world, are erupting into mass panic and localized resource wars. The Leviathan has achieved global conquest without firing a single weapon, simply by revealing the futility of human sovereignty and the irrelevance of our borders in the face of geologic life. The surface world is crumbling beneath the weight of a consciousness that views continents as mere shells. My only remaining function is the archival duty, the preservation of the final, objective scientific record. The atmosphere is rapidly becoming corrosive. The hull of the Triton is vibrating constantly from the tectonic stress. We have maybe hours left before the structural integrity fails or the air becomes lethal from the volcanic SO2 and methane mix. We are recording the final devastating data points. The methane-sulfur crossover, where the atmosphere shifts from merely toxic to immediately lethal. The Leviathan's bioluminescent spectrum, the visual language of its scrutiny, and the final rhythmic patterns of the bioacoustic riddle, the sound of its massive, slow, indifferent thought. The true horror is the cosmic futility. We were not conquered by a superior technology from the stars, but by an ancient, superior biology from our own planet's core. Our end is a massive, elegant planetary reboot, executed by a life form that finds our very existence to be an environmental threat. The Earth itself has decided we are a pollutant. Our species' final epitaph will be the low, resonant thrumming, the sound of the Leviathan thinking, breathing, and slowly, systematically restoring the planet's internal equilibrium. We were an error. The creature is the correction. This is Dr. Aris Thorne, broadcasting from the RV Triton. It is now 4 p.m. local time, 22 hours since the Leviathan emerged. My crew and I are wearing emergency chemical respirators. The air outside the hull is now officially lethal to unshielded human life. The creature's passive defense system, its toxic effluent, has transitioned from a chemical purge to an atmospheric scourge. We have crossed the methane-sulfur crossover point. The atmosphere is now a toxic, volatile mix of methane, CH4, from the released deep-sea hydrates, and sulfur dioxide, SO2, from the creature-triggered volcanic vents. The concentration of SO2 is dissolving the moisture in the air, resulting in massive, localized sulfuric acid rain falling across the Pacific Basin. This acid rain is not merely corrosive. It is destroying the protective cuticles of all terrestrial surface plants that were not already killed by the oceanic O2 collapse. Simultaneously, the unchecked CH4 is creating an extreme, localized greenhouse effect that is spiking the regional temperature, feeding the massive, stationary supercyclone anchored above the Leviathan. This cyclone is now acting as a giant, planetary-scale chemical mixer, efficiently distributing the lethal SO2 and CH4 across the northern and southern hemispheres. The creature's emergence has initiated a rapid, catastrophic inversion of the Earth's climate and atmospheric composition. We are faced with the realization that the Leviathan is not concerned with terrestrial warfare. Its objective is purely environmental sterilization. It is creating a dense, hot, anaerobic atmosphere that favors its own mantle-based biology, life that thrives in pressure, heat, and sulfur compounds. It is performing a planetary maintenance cycle, eliminating the surface organisms, us, that rely on a thin, cool layer of oxygen. The death of humanity will be caused not by a blast, but by chemical asphyxiation and acid corrosion, orchestrated by a life form that views the entire atmosphere as a chemical factory. The Leviathan's immense, continuous electromagnetic emission, its massive power signature, is now actively causing a global blackout. We have recorded massive, sustained fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field, magnetic tides, caused by the creature's internal energy generation. The creature is effectively creating a localized, oscillating geomagnetic pole in the Western Pacific. These fluctuations are generating colossal geomagnetically induced currents, GICs, in all long-distance terrestrial conductors, including deep-sea communication cables and high-voltage power grids across the Pacific Rim. The consequence is the terminal failure of global digital communication. Fiber optic data centers, power transmission lines, and military early warning systems are being destroyed by nonlinear GIC surges. The digital world is collapsing, leaving humanity reliant only on archaic, low-power analog and ham radio, the systems the creature deemed irrelevant. This strategic, passive attack on the communication infrastructure ensures that governments cannot coordinate a final unified response, even if one were technically possible. The creature has shattered the nervous system of human civilization with the simple, passive physics of its enormous life force. We are isolated, deaf, and rapidly losing sight of the scale of the global disaster. The world is ending in a cascade of silent electromagnetic failure. In a last, desperate act of existential diplomacy, the few remaining functional, scientific, and diplomatic centers operating on emergency analog relays attempted the final plea, recognizing the failure of kinetic force and the certainty of the creature's logical intent. The human message was shifted from scientific data to emotional appeal. The world's remaining radio systems were used to broadcast a continuous sequence of human cultural artifacts designed to appeal, or at least confuse, the entity's intelligence. Mathematical principles combined with human music, narratives, and, most crucially, the sound of human suffering, a recording of human weeping and fear. The message was a final gamble to appeal to an ethical flaw, a moment of compassion, or a psychological vulnerability in the creature's alien logic. The Leviathan's response was the deepest, most crushing silence. It did not alter its position. It did not alter its bioacoustic riddle. The creature's continuous, rhythmic, subsonic thrumming simply continued, perfectly undeviated by the sounds of human music or human pain. The creature proved that its intelligence is utterly aloof to human emotion, human culture, and human suffering. It views our fear as irrelevant noise, and our pleas as insignificant variations in the geological background static. The ultimate horror is the creature's total indifference to our existence. It is not our enemy. It is simply a colossal correction to a problem it deems necessary. Highly conceptual, diving into the terrifying nature of the creature's intelligence and its perception of time and scale. Our final analysis of the Leviathan's behavior confirms a terrifying truth about its subcrustal consciousness. The creature operates on a geological timescale that renders the entire span of human history, from the first tool to the atomic age, as merely a microsecond of biological noise. Consider the concept of alienation by scale. The creature's body volume, its lifespan, presumably millennia, having survived in the mantle, and its energy budget are so vast that it perceives human beings not as individuals, but as an aerosol, a volatile, ephemeral biological layer that needs to be scrubbed off the planetary surface. Its thoughts, the complex, rhythmic patterns of the bioacoustic riddle, likely span days or weeks. A rapid emotional human response is, to the creature, functionally instantaneous, a meaningless flicker of high-frequency disturbance. The creature's mantle-based biology means its primary environment is the deep earth, where time moves slowly, entropy is highly managed by geothermal forces, and existence is measured in the rhythmic cycles of convection currents and continental drift. The chaotic, energy-intensive, fast-moving surface world is an unacceptable variable in its existence. The Leviathan is simply restoring the geological homeostasis it requires for its own survival. We were never a target. We were an environmental error in its calculations. Its intelligence is vast, ancient, and utterly, perfectly indifferent to the fleeting biological complexity of the surface. We have no shared language, no shared ethics, and no shared perception of the value of existence. We are simply too small, too fast, and too ephemeral to matter. The mission is over. The RV Triton is facing imminent structural failure from the relentless tectonic stress and the massive, anchoring supercyclone above. We have expended our last available clean air. Our final shared act is the archival legacy. We have encased the complete data set, the methane-sulfur crossover figures, the magnetic tide flux charts, the bioacoustic riddle recordings, and the final structural analysis of the crustal scar in a highly hardened, buoyant, deep-sea data capsule. This capsule, equipped with a low-power analog locator beacon, is designed to survive the tectonic collapse and the toxic environment, floating freely until a future intelligence, perhaps millennia hence, is capable of retrieving it. This is our final testament, the objective, scientific record of the moment when the surface biosphere was declared redundant by the mantle organism. I am now sealing the broadcast equipment. The generator is failing. The sound of the Leviathan's continuous, indifferent thrumming is the last thing I hear. We fought a war against a force we couldn't comprehend, And our final defeat is marked not by a wound, but by a chemical correction. We are the victims of a life form that simply woke up and decided to clean house. May the record survive the acid rain. This is Dr. Eris Thorne. It is now 11 p.m. local time, 27 hours since the Leviathan emerged. The RV Triton is no longer a viable vessel. The hull stress fractures are compounding, and the pumps are failing against the immense pressure changes. We are documenting the final moments before structural failure. The most critical update is the confirmation of the irreversible inversion, the planetary shift to a new planetary state dictated by the Leviathan's presence. The plankton purge is complete. Surface water analysis across the entire Western Pacific now shows near zero concentrations of phototrophic life and O2. The methane-sulfur crossover is global, pushed outward by the stationary supercyclone and the prevailing jet stream currents. This is not a temporary disaster. This is the permanent alteration of the Earth's biosphere into an anaerobic, sulfurous, hot environment that favors the creature's mantle-based biology. The O2 that supports human life is now a finite, diminishing resource being consumed by chemical reactions catalyzed by the creature's effluent. The atmosphere is no longer an environment. It is a slow, terminal poison. The creature has initiated a biological extinction event that is perfect in its efficiency and scope. It has eliminated the primary oxygen source, triggered a runaway greenhouse effect, and fouled the water supply, all within a geological microsecond. This confirms the Leviathan's original intent, a planetary maintenance protocol designed to return the surface to a state conducive to deep Earth geothermal life. The age of complex terrestrial surface life is over, replaced by the age of anaerobic chemistry and mantle organisms. Our final analysis of the bioacoustic riddle has yielded one last terrifying piece of data: the creature's destination. The creature's continuous subsonic thrumming is not random. It is a highly complex rhythmic sequence that, when cross-referenced against global seismic models, functions as an acoustic map. This map pinpoints the creature's movement not only in its current location, but projects a long-term, multi-month migratory path. The data suggests the Leviathan is preparing to traverse the Pacific Plate. Its path leads directly, though slowly, toward the Indonesian subduction zone and the Sunda Trench. This is not a random migration. This is a geological objective. The creature is moving toward one of the planet's most active tectonic boundaries. We theorize that the Leviathan is not simply surfacing. It is locating a weakness in the Earth's crust, a deep, geologically unstable zone, to create a new, permanent mantle-to-surface conduit for its deep-sea ecosystem. It is preparing to drill a massive, biological hole through the crust. This would release an exponential, catastrophic volume of magma, gases, and deep Earth compounds, guaranteeing the complete sterilization of the atmosphere and oceans. The Leviathan's final purpose is not merely to exist on the surface, but to irrevocably open the Earth's core to the atmosphere. The geopolitical response is now one of terminal resignation. Governments have abandoned all attempts at military action, recognizing the futility of engaging an enemy that can manipulate the Earth's magnetic field and destroy the crust. The only official communications now are fragmented, non-specific warnings about atmospheric toxicity and seismic instability. The global command centers are essentially managing the end of human sovereignty. The Leviathan's presence has shattered the ultimate human illusion that we were in control of our planetary environment. We were not defeated by superior technology, but by superior scale and superior patience. The creature represents an ancient, powerful, and indifferent biology that simply woke up and decided to clean house. The Leviathan is the ultimate expression of planetary indifference, revealing that the Earth's true dominant life force resides not in the thin layer of oxygen and sunlight, but in the vast, deep, hot chemical core. Our end is a massive geological correction. The RV Triton is breaking up. The tectonic stress is too great and the hull integrity is failing. I am sealing the final broadcast, the transcript of this recording, the migratory acoustic map, and the chemical composition of the final toxic plume into the hardened, buoyant data capsule. This capsule is our last act, the objective record of the moment when humanity was declared redundant by its own planet. The Leviathan remains silent, its massive bioluminescent body pulsing, its rhythmic thrumming continuing its geological conversation. It is indifferent to the ship breaking above it. It is indifferent to the death of the surface world. It is simply executing its planetary maintenance protocol. I am now manually deploying the data capsule. It is designed to survive the deep-sea pressure and the eventual, inevitable seismic collapse of this trench. If any intelligence, human or otherwise, retrieves this in the future, it must understand the final truth. Our existence was a risk to the Leviathan system, and the correction was swift and total. Do not seek to disturb the deep. Do not seek to challenge the scale of geological life. This is Dr. Aris Thorne, final broadcast from the RV Triton, documenting the irreversible inversion. May the data survive the collapse. This is Dr. Aris Thorne. It is 1 a.m. local time, 29 hours since the Leviathan emerged. The RV Triton is now in the terminal phase of structural failure. The sound of the hull deforming is continuous, a screeching metal dirge that signifies the absolute victory of the geological forces over the human endeavor. The creature is no longer anchored. Our final sensor data confirms that the Leviathan has begun its mantle migration. Its slow, deliberate traverse across the Pacific Plate toward the Sunda Trench. Its movement is causing massive, continuous seismic aftershocks that are cascading across the Pacific, guaranteeing the immediate onset of major earthquakes across all coastal regions. The creature, having performed its planetary maintenance protocol, the chemical sterilization of the surface, is now moving to complete its long-term objective, the creation of a new mantle-to-surface conduit. The Leviathan is leaving behind a geological inheritance, a permanent scar on the Earth's crust, the massive, thinned and fractured depression where it anchored itself. This scar will become a region of perpetual volcanic activity and seismic instability for millennia, a monument to the brief, terrifying existence of the mantle organism on the surface. The creature has permanently altered the Earth's seismic equilibrium, forcing the planet into a new, unstable and violent phase of geological activity. We are recording the final data on the creature's migratory acoustic pattern, the bioacoustic map, which reveals a terrifying, slow, methodical purpose. The creature is not traveling fast, it is traveling inevitably. It will reach its destination in approximately 6 months, a timeline that offers a grim certainty of continuous seismic and atmospheric assault for the remaining surface populations. The human species will not have a sudden, clean end, but a prolonged, agonizing attrition beneath the weight of relentless geological and chemical collapse, all orchestrated by a silent, immense, indifferent intelligence. I have physically secured the hardened, buoyant data capsule in the most structurally stable section of the hull. This archive is the last act of the scientific age. It contains not only the objective data, the methane-sulfur crossover charts, the bioacoustic map of migration, the crustal stress data, but also the archive of shame, the final reports detailing the utter failure of global military and political consensus in the face of the existential threat. The archive must convey the truth. The Leviathan did not defeat us with a weapon we could comprehend. It defeated us by outscaling our consciousness, our ethical capacity, and our imagination. Our leaders, faced with the collapse of the biosphere, reverted to tribalism and resource hoarding, proving the creature's probable assessment correct, that human civilization was a systemic pollutant that prioritized its own short-term, chaotic survival over the stability of the planetary system. The creature was simply the efficient planetary maintenance protocol, executing the correction with perfect, cold, biological logic. The final truth we record is that the most dangerous, complex, and beautiful life form on this planet was not ourselves, but the silent, enormous biosphere hidden beneath our feet. A biosphere that decided we were no longer acceptable cohabitants. Our end is a massive, elegant, planetary self-cleaning. The human species is simply the residue of a chemical reaction that went wrong. My final role is to be the archival witness, to speak into the microphone until the final moment of collapse, documenting the sound of the end. The Leviathan's dominance has stripped away every pretense of human importance. We are revealed to be creatures of fragile chemistry and fleeting time, existing on a thin membrane of oxygen that was only ever maintained by the grace of phytoplankton. The creature's existence forces us to confront the cosmic futility of our short, frantic, noisy civilization. The entire span of human history, our empires, our technologies, our arts, is less than a single deep oscillation of the Leviathan's internal metabolism. The creature's mind operates on a timescale of millennia. Its environment is the mantle. Our attempt at communication, our music, our pleas, our science, was a meaningless high-frequency squeak that barely registered against the backdrop of the Earth's deep, constant, geological conversation. The silence that is now enveloping the Triton is the sound of planetary equilibrium being restored. The creature is teaching the Earth a new rhythm, a new song, a massive, slow, subsonic beat that signifies the return to geothermal life. We are simply the sacrificial casualties in the planet's evolutionary shift, a lesson in biological scale that came too late. I can see the water now, leaking rapidly through the primary structural bulkheads. The air is foul, thick with the smell of sulfur and stale metal. I am securing the microphone. The only thing remaining is the sound of the metal tearing and the massive, indifferent thrumming from the deep. The final truth. The Leviathan has won. The surface world is dying. The archive is sealed. I hope, one day, someone retrieves this record and understands that the greatest life forms on Earth are not the ones that breathe air, but the ones that breathe fire and rock. This is Dr. Eris Thorne, final archival witness. May the core find peace.